Hello, my name is Glenda Eoyang. I'm in Circle Pines, Minnesota, and glad to be with you virtually, but sorry to be missing you in person this week as you explore the intersection between the past of conservation science and its future. My colleagues have asked me to share with you a little bit today about systems science and the difference it can make for the future of conservation science. So I'd like to begin by defining what we mean when we say science. So it is knowledge or a system of knowledge covering general truths or the operation of general laws, especially as obtained and tested through the scientific method. So science has a kind of rigor and a kind of shared language and a perspective about generalizability in the use of knowledge and information and wisdom. Now, you know the difference between conservation science and other approaches to conservation. You know that some people do conservation thinking. They focus on conservation, they look at it, they consider it. They have, in a kind of poetic and metaphorical way, have a concern about conservation. There are other people who do conservation doing. They can take actions, they can take steps, either personally or professionally, locally or globally, to affect conservation of species. But what you do is conservation science, and you know that it includes a rigor and a set of history and theory and perspective and tools and models that make the work that you do much more precise and specific and powerful than either conservation thinking or conservation doing. Both of those are necessary, but conservation science is a very specific thing. The same thing is true about systems. There are people who think and talk about systems. In fact, as a conservation scientist, surely you're one of those. There are also people who do things to influence systems. They can do that consciously or unconsciously. They can do it in terms of metaphors or possibilities or habits or norms. But what will help you in the future in conservation is very specifically systems science, where you use a rigorous set of models and methods to see and understand and influence systems in all their parts and all their wholes. Now, we say systems science as if it were one thing, but it, like conservation science, includes many different paths and possibilities within it. This graphic will give you a sense of the diversity of options in systems sciences, the places that they come from, the places that they cluster, and how they generate particular models and methods for work in the future. Now, I know it's difficult to read this from the screen at this moment, but if you'll ask Matt, I'm sure he'll be happy to share with you this lovely image about the history, present, and future of systems sciences in particular and in general. Now, regardless of which of these you choose, any one of them will help you clarify and be specific about your understanding about systems science and ways to influence it. But you can't try them all. So I'd like to share with you what we see as the core three elements in any systems sciences approach. What do they all have in common? Well, the first thing is they all have some way to bound a system. We call it a container. So that boundary may be at the individual entity level, it may be at a pair or a family level, it may be an ecosystem or a community, or it may be a global combination of intersections of ecologies of many kinds. But every system science approach has one or more ways to bound and set what the boundaries are of a system. The second is differences. So all of these approaches have a way or more to talk about what are the differences that make a difference, to establish a pattern that you can observe and make meaning of, or to open possibilities for intervening, because the differences in systems are the places where the energy and potential lie. The third characteristics that all system sciences share is that they talk about exchanges or flows, differences, ways that material or information or possibility flow across boundaries and differences. So these are the three characteristics of systems. Now, if you think about the work that you do in conservation sciences, what are the containers that are most critical to the work that you do, and how do they change over time? What are the differences that you focus on, and what are the exchanges or the flows that are most important to you? And wouldn't it be helpful if you had a more precise and rigorous way to think and talk about those in the benefit of the part and the whole and the greater whole? So if you think about conservation through a systems sciences lens, there's some very specific questions that emerge. I'm going to invite you to carry those questions with you through the rest of this session and through the rest of the week as you think and talk with people about the future of conservation science. So why systems science? Well, one question is, do you hold unexamined assumptions that block your creative thought and action? Now, all of us do. But how do we put our fingers on the assumptions that are either blocking our work or moving it forward? That's one of the major features of systems sciences, that it helps you surface, examine, and choose your sets of assumptions, which will either free you or constrain you in new and more powerful ways. How often do you miss important signals because you're distracted by environmental noise? Now, complex systems, like the ones we're working in, there are often many, many sources of information, of concern, of perspective, many voices of stakeholders and opportunities, and floods of data that may give us some insight. But very often in these complex systems, we're distracted because we don't know where to focus or where to pay attention. So one of the gifts of systems sciences and conservation science is that it helps you focus in and know which things to see and which signals to listen to. Can you always see which differences will make the most difference? Just like the signals, differences that make a difference are multiple, myriad in the spaces where you're working. How do you select the ones that are not just the ones you can measure, not just the ones that are most popular, but how can you see in these complex systems, what are the differences that truly make a difference? Do you and your team work across levels, individual to collective or local to global? If you do, then I'm sure you've found the difficulty of taking things that you can know at one scale and apply it at a different scale. You can know about the individual stakeholders, but what can that tell you about the dynamics of a whole community? You can know about what's happening locally, but what can that tell you? How can you translate that into global patterns and influences? Well, some forms of systems science will help you do that. Be aware of the whole and the part and the greater whole. How effectively do you work with other disciplines and methods and locales? Often systems sciences allow you to do a translation so that things that you see in your context, you can generalize and then compare and contrast in other contexts. Do you wish you had new ways to discover hidden potential for change or to uncover hidden barriers? Do you find yourself asking the same questions over and over again, or taking the same actions over and over again because you don't see what other options might be? Well, systems sciences are lovely ways to uncover other opportunities and perspectives. How would your praxis, as Martin defined it, and how would your products change if you applied disciplined, rigorous methods to explore the boundaries and differences and relationships in your systems? So I invite you to carry these questions with you as you explore multiple systems sciences, as you think about the ways that you can use what you have done in the history of conservation science, what you see and know now as major challenges and issues, as you and your colleagues create the future of conservation science together. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce you to my friend and colleague, Beverly Parsons. Beverly is a professional evaluator, executive director of Insights. She works with a variety of contexts, focusing on evaluation. She's the recent past president of the American Evaluation Association. and she's recognized around the world as a gifted and rigorous evaluator. Now, of all the people I know who do evaluation of various kinds, Beverly is the one who's able to bring the most rigorous perspective of systems, a greatest concern for environmental applications, and a real deep understanding for the context and the need for understanding and action in complex systems. So I'm sure you'll enjoy her sharing about the science of evaluation and how it might support you in conservation science. So thank you for your work in the past. Thank you for your attention today. And thank you for the discoveries you'll make this week together about the future of conservation science.